is to do Essential 8. It's one thing to do it, it's another thing to keep you there. Like Essential 8's hard. And you need a couple of third-party programs and subscriptions to actually do this properly, and you need to monitor on it, right? So again, if you have a breach and your cyber insurance company wants some proof that you've been doing things, you've got a monthly report saying, well, no, we are. Like, this is what we're doing every single month, and you can actually prove that. Or you're not large enough to hire your internal people and have teams doing it internally, which most of us, we probably aren't large enough for that. And you don't understand the requirements. It's great to understand the AML and the CTF and the Essential 8, but how do you bring the technology into that, like to actually build those frameworks for you? And you're not sure how to complete a risk assessment. And again, if you go back to those websites that I just showed you, there's a risk assessment templates on there. So there's places to start if you don't know where to start yourself. But what we would be suggesting is doing a risk assessment yourself. That's the first place, right? Actually do one across your board, understand what you're holding, what data you've got, how sensitive it is. Create an incident response plan. Again, there's templates there. You can just grab them and start to run with them. Understand the risks and learn what's acceptable. That's the key one, because you can't do everything. Everything can cost a large amounts of money. So understanding where the massive or the biggest risk is, focus on that first, and then accept the risk of everything else after it, right? So as an example of that, you may have all your asset management, all you guys have computers, but if your tenancy or your NetDocs isn't locked down properly, what's to stop someone from going home and jumping on their kid's computer and jumping into SharePoint, syncing all their data down and then getting a ransomware attack and syncing back into the company and crippling everything, right? So there's things that you've got to start to think about, and to do all those kind of things, there's large budgets for that are needed, but you need to accept those kind of risks of what they are. And lastly, if you don't know what to do, partner with an expert that can help you. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Who knew Bunnings? More than just sausage and bread.
Awesome.
Note to self. I'm going to hand over to Aidan now, who's going to talk about other things. All
Awesome.
AI.
Poor Bunnings is copying it. That's a shame to hear. Awesome. Well, thanks very much for having me, everyone. My name's Aidan Clifford. As Sarah mentioned, the Microsoft Business Manager over at Pax8. You may not know Pax8 because we do partner on the front lines with great businesses like KMT, but what we are a global Microsoft solution provider. We provide a marketplace to help resellers really obtain Microsoft solutions and provide enterprise solutions into the SMB and corporate space that wouldn't ordinarily get one-to-one attention from Microsoft. It's a really exciting time at the moment with the advent of AI solutions really making a big splash, that we get to have conversations around how do things like Copilot really start to make an impact for you? How do you start to turn IT and technology, which is traditionally a cost center, into a profit center through a lot of the productivity gains that you can start to get there, and start to really get more out of the workforce that that you've been investing so much in. So looking forward to getting stuck into the conversation today. I'm not too sure if you've seen this slide before. I've shown it a couple of times at a few KMT events recently, but I do like to start here really to provide a benchmark on how far we've come so far and the splash that AI solutions have really made, particularly generative AI is what I'm going to focus on today. So if we look at some particular technology inflection points over the past 20 years, it's interesting to see how fast AI has grown in comparison to others. So over the past 20 years, to get to a magic number of 100 million users, showing a real scale of that adoption, we can start to see things like mobile phones, things like hardware like the internet initially. To get to 100 million users, it's taking 15 years, it's taking 10 years, it's taking 7 years. Even free platforms that are really just kind of to get people onboarded as quickly as possible, like social media through Facebook, took 4.5 years to get to 100 million users. Fast forward to when ChatGPT came onto the scene about 18 months ago, it got to that 100 million user mark in 3 months. So it's absolutely staggering the rate that's really increasing. And it's pretty much, I think, I had a look at the stat yesterday, about 45% of the global internet users have used ChatGPT since it's been launched. So it's gone absolutely bananas. But I did have a little interesting tidbit. Does anyone know any solutions or any games that have grown at a faster rate than ChatGPT to 100 million users? Bit of a random one, but it is a bit of trivia that I do enjoy. The only thing that I could find that grew faster than ChatGPT to 100 million users was Pokemon Go back in 2016. So may have had a good guess down the back there. So I'll give you the chocolates on that one. But if we've got a solution that it's not consumer grade, it's not as viral as Pokemon with kids, and it's got some business solutions to it, I reckon it's worth having a bit of a dive into. So Microsoft, obviously working with OpenAI behind the scenes, saw the impact that ChatGPT was able to make. More locally in Australia, they reached out to the Tech Council of Australia to talk about generative AI and have a look at the impact that it can have to the Australian economy. They broke it into 3 sort of buckets of slow adoption, medium adoption, quick adoption to see what that impact might look like. And they're seeing that over the next couple of years, it's going to make a difference between $45 to $115 billion worth of increased impact to the Australian economy which is probably about a 4 to 5% increase, if I'm doing my maths correctly there. But I just wanted to show this slide because you might not be able to see the subheadings down the bottom here, but where are those impacts going to come from? The vast majority are going to come from increased productivity, so getting more out of our workforce today, and improving the quality of the work that they're able to do there. There isn't too much as far as the fear factor around jobs going away. In fact, there's a slight increase in the amount of jobs that are going to come into the market. The vast majority is getting more out of the current workforce though. And then there's more opportunity around new business growth, new creation that is going to provide, and more innovations that we're not aware of yet, so new products in that space as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. We used to hear AI is going to take my job, but no, actually it's going to be able to get me to a position where I can do more with the minutes I have in my day. So I've spoken about ChatGPT, generative AI in general, but why am I talking about Microsoft in particular? Microsoft, on the back of making billions and billions of dollars worth of investments to get their Copilot solution up and running, it also ties into that they're using the large language models that has made ChatGPT successful. They're working together behind the scenes with OpenAI and they're really advancing it. So if you do like ChatGPT, chances are at a baseline level, you'll get a pretty good experience out of Copilot day to day. Where things start to get really interesting though, is if I think about the length that I've been a student or the length that I've been in the workforce, getting to a longer year than I'm willing to admit at the moment. However, I've been using Microsoft apps the entire time. I know how to use Word, I know how to use PowerPoint, Outlook, Excel, etc. They're bringing generative AI into that experience, so they're able to augment the skills that you already have and take you even further. I was talking to someone at Microsoft the other day. They said that on average, most users only use 5 to 10% of the features within their Microsoft apps. There's a whole bunch of features sitting on the table. If you see a whiz working with Excel, they look like magicians because we don't actually know what you can do in there. So if you have someone that can help you get more out of those solutions, you're obviously getting a better return on investment. What it also ties into is if you've transitioned into Microsoft 365, so during COVID down here in Melbourne, everyone was working remotely within about 24 hours at a certain stage. So most of our environments have transitioned from on-prem into the cloud, largely into Microsoft 365, into Azure from an infrastructure perspective. Copilot ties directly into that data set. So if you're tying the large language models you want to use into the apps you already know how to use, into where your data already resides, that sounds like a much more logical position to use AI than if I use a third-party tool, I'm bringing the information across there and I don't know exactly what they're doing with my data when it does go across there as well. So there's a few considerations, and then it ties into the internet as well to use the large knowledge base there as well. So hopefully it creates a bit of a compelling example of why we'd want to dive into it from a Microsoft perspective versus some of the other competitors out there. So we've established generative AI is here, but it's also in the workplace today. We saw this stat from Microsoft the other day, and it's showing that the vast majority of people are starting to use generative AI at work. So 75% of people are using AI at work already, and nearly half of those started in the past 6 months. So it's really ramping up. People are adopting these products whether we like them or not in the workplace. So it is something that we need to tackle head on, whether it's to be able to enhance that usership or understand some of the implications that it may have for our business. We're also seeing that 78% of AI users are bringing their own tool to work. So I think Kelly was talking about the introduction of unknown, like shadow IT, shadow apps into the workplace and the risks that that can create. If you're bringing an AI solution into the workplace and you don't have guidelines on how to use that, then potentially that does bring some risk into the fray, which you really want to make sure that you have some guidelines, you have some playbooks, controlling the apps, how they work, but then also giving guidance on users to something which is quite new to them to reduce any risk that it has for your business and the data in there as well. And it's even more prevalent in SMBs where we all like to operate. So sub 300 users, which I think a lot of us are, that's where the vast majority of people are looking to make those really big productivity gains. So for an example that's coming closer to home, we've heard a few horror stories already around the use of AI and cybersecurity breaches. This one might be a little bit too close to home because it is a Melbourne law firm, so apologies if anyone knows these guys. But we are starting to see some instances where people are misusing AI. They're taking shortcuts. They're not using the tools to augment their work and productivity. They're using it to cut corners, and they're getting found out the hard way. So we did have an instance. I actually looked for this article because I read it I think in November. The date's probably up there somewhere. I read it in November. I tried to find it for this presentation, and when I was looking it up, I actually found 3 or 4 more local ones in Australia as well. So they are becoming more prevalent, unfortunately. The incident that we had here is there was a gentleman working in a law firm providing a brief, I believe it was to the family court. They put their brief, they submitted their brief in. The judge found that all of the preference or the reference cases that they put in there were actually created by ChatGPT. They didn't actually exist, but it read really well. So it looked really nice when they reviewed it. And that's my argument. That's what I'd like to submit. I'll put that one in there. Job done. Come back. The judge says these cases don't exist. Your case is now null and void, and you may have to take a little holiday from the law industry for a little while, and maybe pay a couple of grand in fines. So we'll see what happens there. But these aren't isolated incidents. We all sort of had a bit of a chuckle when we saw them happening in the States last year or a couple of years ago. Thought it's not going to happen here, but they are starting to creep in. So that's where we need to start to find a better way to do that. That's what I referenced to on the right-hand side with some of those statistics. The vast majority of firms, individuals are already using AI. The vast majority of firms are planning to adopt AI in a formal way, but only a small percentage of those actually have any AI management practices in place, and only a small amount of them actually even think to get those in place as well. So really need to get on the front foot, talk to the experts, talk to the KMT team about what is my plan, not only for the cybersecurity stuff that Scott was talking about, but how do we use that strong platform to then build the productivity on top of that as well. So that's what it brings it back to Copilot. So in addition to the behavioral change and the user change and the management policies we put in place on the usage of AI, Microsoft also thinks about these checks and balances into the solutions as they build them out. So if you are investing in Microsoft 365 licensing, first step is to get the most out of that license. Make sure you're maximizing the security features there. If there's any gaps, how do you fill in those gaps and make sure that they're switched on? There's a license, you may not know the term for it, but I have to deal with this stuff every day, called Microsoft 365 E5. It's the top of the chain, has pretty much every security feature under the sun in there. Some businesses pay that $100 per user per month or $80 per user per month, and they think the job is done. They have an incident, someone comes in, they review it, and they realize nothing's actually switched on, they're just paying the money. And Microsoft is just cashing the checks, basically. So you do need to do that due diligence, make sure everything is switched on. Having any of the compliance features for those internal users to make sure that people have access to the right documentation at the right time. If they don't need to access it, make sure that you have some sensitivity labeling in there, or conditional access, because you want to make sure that, say, I don't have access to the payroll information, because if I put AI on top of that, I can access sensitive information I shouldn't at the speed of a hat, versus just clicking around in folders the old-fashioned way. Microsoft also builds in responsible AI into their, basically into their ethos as part of the value proposition as well. What I mean by that is that if you look at ChatGPT, what it provides is that it doesn't provide any guarantees that your data is not going back into training the model, that it isn't being stored on site as well. You can request for it to be deleted. That's a manual process. A lot of people don't know that that's there, but Microsoft commits that your prompts aren't leaving your service boundaries. The data isn't leaving Australia as a compute geography as well. So you are falling in local guidelines and local security checks on the usage of your generative AI versus ChatGPT, the free version, may be storing your information and it may be computed off-site as well. So there may be some ramifications that you may be unaware of whilst trying to use the tool. I won't go too far into this one today. It does cover off a little bit of what Scott was going through, but whilst it is a bit of a long journey to becoming quite mature in the modern workplace and covering off all of your cybersecurity needs, there is a really tried and true method to doing that. So using frameworks like the Essential 8, using frameworks like at PAX8, we work with the CIS controls that Scott mentioned as well. So we're making sure that we're doing checks and balances on top of that to make sure we're up to date. And if there is a slowdown in the government providing guidance, we're using international standards to make sure you get there. So there's features that you can follow, which are more high priority than others, to make sure you fall within the bell curve of if there is a cybersecurity incident, we're covering off the highest percentage of chance of that being an issue before we get to the smaller and smaller use cases. But as time goes on, we get more security and we're also enabling higher productivity from there as well. But if we start to look at top use cases, so getting outside of the cybersecurity realm, more into the productivity generation, what are some of the top use cases in the legal industry as well? A lot of these are pretty consistent across most businesses, but they do start to get a bit more technical and a bit more prevalent just for legal firms in particular. But if you start to think about the low-hanging fruit, Teams meetings. We're in Teams meetings all the time. You may be using Zoom, but if you're on Teams, you know that everyone's taking notes, everyone's trying to keep up to date. Once that meeting's finished, you may be starting a new one. You've probably got 8 to 10 hours worth of meetings per day. So really high value, a big use of your time, but then following up on those, creating those notes, creating action points are something that can be a bit slow, can be inaccurate, or if you're way too busy, you may forget to do it altogether. Copilot provides probably the highest value, fastest to market way of doing that. You can turn on Copilot, get to the end of your meeting, generate your meeting recap, generate your action items by assigning by person, and all of a sudden that's captured in a really effective way. And I'll cover off a few of the findings Microsoft has of that in a few moments. So through Copilot for Microsoft 365, a lot of these management, a lot of these operational, and a lot of these productivity examples are really accessible out of the box. But when you start to get to a few of the more specific legal matters, I won't talk out of turn on my expertise on legal matters in that regard, but I know that Q&A is particularly important, making sure that the quality of the work that you're putting out there is the highest regard, as per the horror story we saw earlier. So that's where we have Copilot for Microsoft 365, but some of the automation examples that Scott and I were chatting about before we started the event today really start to represent more use cases that may be limiting the scope within the documentation that you can use, providing some automation to do that, and making sure it's in a format and has the details that is robust enough for you guys to be able to present either to your clients or externally. So we can get into a bit more of the detail of that maybe in the Q&A or after the event, happy to chat about it. But there are quite a few parts to the Copilot family which can be more relevant to more specific use cases outside of the more general way that Copilot from Microsoft 365 can help you. So if we think about some of those use cases, we can start to see what does a day in the life of a lawyer look like when it starts to come through for AI. So I think about my role. I work in a global role, so at any time of the day, I might have people over in the States or in the UK or even the Asia team sending me messages, booking me into meetings that I don't want to attend because they're at 3 o'clock in the morning, or a whole bunch of different things that create what Microsoft terms a digital debt before I've even turned my laptop on in the morning. I know that probably happens for lawyers in the same time zone because you guys work all hours of the day anyway, so there's probably always someone pinging you at ungodly hours. You may be online, you may be offline. You have to sleep at some point, but there's going to be a time where you do need to catch up, summarize things, and get up to speed as fast as possible. That's where I really effectively use Copilot just first thing in the morning for 5 minutes, summarize all the emails I haven't answered from the past 24 hours, including when I was offline, summarize all the Teams messages I've missed, and then if I've got a few priority contacts that I need to keep up to date with, please prioritize the lists of my manager and my team so I can see exactly those users. So you kind of cut through the noise of what you need to read before you start your day. So hopefully starting off with a bit more of a clean slate on how you're then able to tackle the job for the rest of the day. So then think about, you've cleaned up your inbox, you're then looking for answers for some of the matters that you need to bring to the table. That's where Copilot, one of the other advantages is, it can speak across multiple data points at the same time. So you don't just have to speak, okay, Outlook, summarize this for me, okay, Teams, summarize this for me, and then doing it by individual networks on there. You're able to use a feature called Copilot Chat, which will speak across all of your data within your M365 environment, and it's able to bring that together, which you can then interact with and ask questions as well. So you can really start to synthesize a lot of that data, which is very challenging to do with some of the other third-party tools out there. I won't cover it off in the full timeline. I think you probably get the idea, but when you start to think about how I can clean up my inbox, how I can synthesize all that information I want to catch up on and I want to research, and then you can bring that into things like Word to draft up a really speedy proposal. Obviously, sense check, make sure it reads well, make sure the details are accurate in there. It is Copilot, it's not autopilot. You can then bring that through, email that through, get some checks and balances with your boss, make sure it's all up to speed. But then finally, one of the really good examples of where Copilot can save some time is if you've got a branded company template that you need to refer to, you don't want to get in trouble with marketing by using fonts or colors or logos that you're not allowed to. You can say, Copilot, use this branded template with this proposal and create that 10-slide presentation. That's something that I've really effectively used over the past few months, and it's the marketing team hasn't called out and given me a slap on the wrist yet, which is always nice to happen. So that's one of the areas that I focus on. Finally, I did sort of mention it a few moments ago, but the Teams example really does save a lot of time in my day. Like it saves me hours a week, for example. If you're unable to attend a meeting, you really effectively can watch the recording and see if you've been mentioned or find hot topics within that meeting that are relevant for you. So if it goes for 90 minutes, you may be able to catch up really effectively in 10, or you're able to make sure that you can create a really robust list of action items in a table in whatever format, make sure it's referring to the stakeholder that needs to follow up, so you can create that accountability down the road and keep that productivity in your back pocket as well. So really don't underestimate the impact that it can make on some of those meetings and some of the things that are really absorbing a lot of time in your day. But it's an art and a science at the same time. So one of the things that I have seen as far as needing to change in a lot of the partners that I speak to and a lot of the users that I speak to as well is what goes into creating a good prompt. And not all prompts are created equal. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday who told me he was a bit of a naysayer on AI in general, particularly on Copilot through the context of the conversation. But it's just like, it's just not giving me what I want. I've put into Copilot, please prioritize my emails for me, and it comes out with rubbish. It's just anything. And it's like, well, we've asked it for anything. So that's one of the issues that we need to tackle on first half. If we say, Copilot, please look at my emails over the past week, list prioritization by contacts, so my manager, my team, and any subject matter as well. I was asking him to give me that information for me. We structured that prompt in a bit more of a structured way. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to see where we need to go here. I just need to take that extra 5 to 10 seconds up front to save that extra half an hour or an hour on the back end to get what I want in there. So there is a bit of behavioral change. There's a bit of change management in there as well. That's where we get together. We've had a few sessions recently, which I think we've got a few more coming up around practical demos in Copilot as well, which I'm sure you're more than welcome to join, because it is this muscle building that you need to create in these little incremental wins that really help save the time in your day and get the most out of that investment in Copilot and really maximize the investment you're making in your tech journey altogether as well. So we can share these slides out with you. So if you use these ingredients of what's the goal, what's the context of what I want to do, what's the source I want or the data set that I want the prompt to refer to, and then what are my expectations? Do I want it to be formal? Do I want it to be long? Do I want it to be in dot points? This really does structure it and help create the output that you want to get closer from the first instance versus having to go back and forth a few times. So I've had the opportunity to work with Copilot for about 18 months. I was lucky enough to be part of the early access program. If I compare my experiences with Copilot on day one versus my experiences today, both I've become better with the tool, but the tools have also become a lot better as well. Microsoft is making updates to these multiple times a day pretty much. So if you are finding that you had a bad experience in the past 6 months or 12 months ago, I really do encourage you to jump back in again and have a look. And if you have any questions, do send them through, because we want to make sure that we all progress on this together. And chances are, even by asking that question and verbalizing it, we may be able to start to break down what's the thing that's blocking the success for you there as well. Some of the really quick wins I've had, so particularly in my role, sales, marketing, program management sort of stuff, it's really on the text productivity that I'm really experiencing from. So summarizing and drafting within Word. I've shown some of the examples up there for you. One of the ones that was really underestimated as far as how impactful it was for me was if I need to bring a manager along to a meeting, or say, for example, we're going along to a client meeting, we want to have a discussion, but we're trying to synthesize all of the information together. I can say, please create a one-page brief for an executive team based on an existing document featuring pros and cons within that document as well. So changing the entire structure of the data that it's reading, but presenting it in a really short format, so anyone else who's attending a meeting might be able to get up to speed in the cab on the way over, or 10 minutes prior to the call, not needing to have necessarily an hour call before that just to really prep for it. So really speeding up how fast we're able to speed up those conversations. I've sort of spoken about Teams already, spoken a little bit about Outlook. Outlook's actually getting pretty good. There have been a lot of changes there recently. So people don't realize that you can start to schedule meetings through Outlook through Copilot now. So say, for example, everyone's pretty busy. They may only have 1 hour free crossover in an entire week. You can say, Copilot, please find a meeting for person A, person B for 1 hour before next Thursday, and it'll scour through everyone's schedule to find that slot for you and allow you to book in that meeting with a click of a button. I don't know about you, but I hate Scheduling Assistant. I don't like scrolling across the page trying to find that blank spot in everyone's calendars. So anything that breaks that down for me is a huge help. Finally, one of the ones that I do have as well, actually I sort of covered that one off. Just really recapping. You can even recap periods of time in live meetings. So say, for example, you have to step out of the room to take a phone call. You can come back in and ask Copilot, please summarize what's taken place over the past 10 minutes, making sure I didn't miss out on anything. And you get a little blurb just to kind of catch up so you can reintegrate yourself into that conversation and not miss out. Don't want any FOMO in your meetings. And the results are starting to come in. So we do want to see what's the meat behind what Microsoft is offering. Hopefully we can see some tangible results from the pitching that we're seeing from Microsoft as well. So it's looking really positive. From a qualitative perspective, about 70% of users who first used Copilot weren't willing to give it up. They said they were feeling more productive. Microsoft started using some interesting questions saying, if we offered you free lunch once a month, would you give up Copilot? They said no. Twice a week? They're like, oh, only about 80%. So we saw that some people really loved their lunch, but the vast majority were still wanting to hold on to the Copilot license, even in the face of a couple of bribes from the management team. So that's great to see that people value their productivity. They value the solution that they're being offered. I'm more of a fan of qualitative statistics though. So when it comes down to the Teams meeting that I was mentioning, they pitted two groups against each other, a couple of hundred users, some using Copilot, some not using Copilot, to summarize a 35-minute meeting. They found the Copilot users were able to summarize that meeting to a higher standard 4 times faster than those who weren't using Copilot. So a massive injection of time back into their day, and also a higher quality of output that the other workers were able to utilize as well. If we moved outside of Teams, so things like searching, things like drafting, things like summarizing text, the Copilot group, again, 29% faster than the non-Copilot group at least an equivalent quality standard as well. So 30% of time back in their day for those tasks. And it got to the stage where they reviewed the sales team in its individual, and they found that this average salesperson was able to bring 90 minutes back into their week. So that was the amount of time that they were able to save. 90 minutes more that they were able to close deals additionally in the week. Knowing salespeople myself, probably 90 minutes faster they get to a pub on a Friday, but we'll see how they go here. But in the context of thinking about how it can impact, say, the legal firm, if my maths is correct, that's about 15 billable units if we're going by 6-minute units that you can inject back into your week if you're fully utilizing the Copilot. Today, it's probably going to get better in the future, but today that would be 15 units, which if you do your hourly rates, it's probably going to be a multiple time ROI on the cost of that monthly license once you're up and running as well. So hopefully that's a good consideration. So just closing up, just my last slide for today, but what we really want to do out of this entire exercise is turning the AI excitement, turning that marketing machine into foundational productivity for your business. So building on top of the great points that we've heard from Kelly and from Scott on creating new business motions for you, doing your due diligence on changing subjects, and then enhancing your cybersecurity. You want to make sure that you're doing more with less. The focus is on productivity, making sure that you get the most out of your current IT investments, so that if you make even more investments on top of that in AI, you're getting multiple ROIs on that. Preparing for Copilot, we've covered off a lot of the cybersecurity side of things, so it's a lot around how the treatment of data exists within your organization. One of the benefits of Copilot, or one of the reliefs of Copilot, is that it doesn't create any new security issues externally. It can exacerbate ones that you have internally if your data isn't structured correctly. So that is a consultation I definitely would recommend, making sure that people have access to the right documents at the right time, making sure that you're treating your data properly, you're not retaining it unnecessarily, and then you have your processes around that with backups, archiving, etc. And then take your first steps. If you haven't experienced Copilot at all, or you've only used ChatGPT briefly, if at all, check it out on the Microsoft website. They've actually done a really good job of some of the content that you've been able to consume to get a bit of a taste into how you can get started there. I'd really recommend reaching out to the KMT team, because really you want to relate it to some of the pain points in your business. That's where it makes a really tangible difference, getting some of those use cases, getting some of those quick wins. But a lot of it does come from that one-to-one conversation of, this is how we work day to day, this is how we can align Copilot to that conversation, and then go out and try it. Create a user group within your business, create some heroes who'll do the heavy lifting at the start, and then bring the rest of the business along the way as well. So there's also a lot of community events. We'll collaborate a lot, PAX8 and KMT, on this matter. So hopefully see you again at an event soon. But I think that's it from me. And yeah, thank you very much.